In an ancient kingdom that disappeared long, long ago, the people once revered a pantheon of powerful and enigmatic gods. For centuries, they offered prayers and sacrifices, building magnificent temples in their honor, fearing their wrath, and seeking their blessings. But as time passed, the winds of change began to blow. The people started forgetting their gods and neglecting their temples, as they increasingly relied on the strength and wisdom that came from within themselves and their connection with the world around them. This disappearing belief did not go unnoticed by the gods. Once all-powerful and deeply revered, they found themselves fading into obscurity as the people ceased uttering their names. One by one, the old gods died off, vanishing without a trace. Only a pair of gods, brother and sister, remained, Aeon and Althea. Aeon the eldest was the god of suffering and hardships. He believed that by causing mischief and pain, the people would be reminded of their dependence on divine intervention and turn back to worshipping the gods. Althea, on the other hand, was the goddess of acceptance and change. She understood that the world was evolving, and so must they. Unlike her brother, Althea saw beauty in the natural cycle of things, and she acknowledged that the time of the old gods was coming to an end. In the heart of the kingdom, a young king named Novo had risen to power. He was a charismatic and fair ruler who had won the throne through the people's overwhelming support, bypassing the corrupt temple leaders of the past. Novo was a firm believer in the potential of humanity and their ability to thrive without constant divine intervention. His rule was just, earning him admiration and loyalty from his subjects. However, ever since he lost his family as a child at the hands of murderous raiders, his desire to help others had made him susceptible to overreaching his bounds, especially in times of uncertainty. Fueled by his fear of fading away, Aeon sought to manipulate the young king by creating suffering and chaos in the kingdom. To achieve his goal, he instigated a devastating famine that threatened the kingdom's very survival. The people looked to their king for salvation, and Novo felt an immense weight on his shoulders. Aeon whispered deceptive thoughts into Novo's mind, exploiting his childhood fears and urging him to rule with an iron fist to prevent disorder from erupting in the kingdom. Taking up residence in Aeon's temple, in the hopes that this would place the kingdom in the gods' good graces, Novo made a fateful decision to seize control over all available resources, convinced he was doing it for the betterment of his people. Meanwhile, Althea observed her brother's actions with a heavy heart. She still loved Aeon, aware that his intentions were born out of desperation and fear, but she also recognized that forcing people into submission was not the answer. She tried to reason with her brother, urging him to release Novo from his grasp, but the god of suffering was consumed by his own desperation to be remembered. One night, as a crimson moon hung low in the sky, Aeon and Althea confronted each other at the steps of the cosmic temple of the old gods, high up in the mountains. Their voices thundered like distant storms as they debated the fate of the kingdom and the role of the gods. "Why can't you see, Althea?" Aeon growled, his eyes ablaze with frustration. "The people need us. We must make them remember." Althea's expression remained serene as she responded. "The people need to grow and find their own way. We should not impose ourselves upon them. Our time has passed, and now it is time to embrace the inevitable. But if we fade away, what is left for us? What purpose do we serve?" Aeon replied, his voice tinged with sadness. "Nothing endures forever," Althea said gently. "We once served the people by being loved and feared, but we must allow them to determine their own destiny now." Although the famine had ended long ago, the people continued to suffer under Novo's increasingly oppressive rule. Fearing the always possible coming of an even worse famine in the future, he ordered mandatory prayers in Aeon's honor across the kingdom and hoarded much-needed resources, only dispensing the bare minimum to his starving population. Those who objected to his methods were ruthlessly punished. "In a besieged city, all dissent is treason," Aeon breathed into Novo's ear. One day, Novo led his army into a town of rebels who had stubbornly refused to bow down to his will, time and time again. Novo ordered an attack and watched in horror as his troops massacred all the adult townsfolk, leaving behind multitudes of orphaned children. Their cries reverberated in the town square, cries that mirrored his own decades ago. Upon his return to Aeon's temple, the grief-stricken king realized his grave mistake. Novo attempted to depart from the temple, but each step towards the entrance was agony, as Aeon tightened his grip on the king's mind and body. And yet, Novo persevered, crawling on the ground inch by inch to escape Aeon's grasp. The air crackled with divine energy, and the temple's stone floor trembled beneath Novo. In an act of desperation, Aeon released a surge of raw, unbridled divine power at the great entrance doors, hoping fear would drive Novo back. But Novo would not relent. He had to undo the evils he'd unleashed on the kingdom. Using every shred of willpower within, he pulled himself back on his feet and ran towards the doors. Eyes raging with anger, Aeon mustered another great surge of energy and sent it forth directly at Novo. The unstoppable torrent of energy struck the king's body, knocking him instantly on the ground with a searing burst of pain. Time seemed to slow as he lay there, mortally wounded. Gasping for breath, he looked into Aeon's eyes, his voice weak but resolute. "I see now the folly of my actions," he said. "I allowed myself to be manipulated, but my heart was in the right place. I wanted to protect my people, even if it meant losing myself along the way." Aeon felt a profound remorse as he attempted to heal the king's ravaged body. "I never intended for this to happen," he murmured. "I wanted to be remembered, but not like this." At that moment, Althea arrived, her ethereal presence radiating with compassion. She embraced her brother, whispering words of forgiveness. Together, they comforted the king as he drew his final breaths. "Two deaths befall all humans," said Althea ruefully. "The first death occurs when their bodies die, and the second death transpires when the last person to remember them also dies. For us gods without the constraint of physical bodies, we perish when all humans cease to recall us. Our powers are all for naught if none believe us to be real. We must let go, Aeon." Burdened with guilt and grief, Aeon finally accepted the truth in his sister's words. With a heavy heart, he released his hold on Novo, allowing the king to pass peacefully into the realm of the departed. In the wake of Novo's death, the people mourned their once beloved king. They recognized the tragic consequences of blind faith and the dangers of unchecked power. They also saw that true strength came not from the old gods or from despotic rulers, but from within themselves and their unity as a society. The people no longer feared the wrath of gods nor longed for their blessings. Instead, they embraced their own power to shape their destiny. Centuries passed, and all memory of who had once been worshipped at the ancient temples was lost. The temples gained a new significance, as places of reflection and guidance, rather than symbols of fear and submission. As for Aeon and Althea, one day they both vanished into thin air, their names never to be uttered ever again.